The best strategy is buy and hold. You don't need all these other crazy strategies. You don't need to short the market. You don't need to buy and sell. You don't need to trade in and out. None of that is going to make as big of a long-term difference as just buying and holding. To me, fiat is just a melting ice cube. The longer you hold your melting ice cube, the more the chances are that you're not going to find a freezer to put that ice cube in. You need to find assets to put your US dollars in. Bitcoin is one of those assets. The evidence is pretty compelling to say that Bitcoin is probably going to do very well in the next few years, and I think eventually it would be money.
Okay, today on Proof of Thought, we have Rajat Soni. He was a CFA, deeply embedded in the traditional finance and accounting world, but he left it all behind to go all in on Bitcoin and to orange pill the world. He's here to reveal his biggest mistakes he's made on his Bitcoin journey, how he handled those massive 50 to 80% drawdowns, and exactly what a dovish Fed in 2026 might mean for Bitcoin. Rajat, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. So everyone in Bitcoin has an origin story. Can you take me back to the moment when Bitcoin first landed on your radar? What was happening in your life at the time and what pulled you in?
So I first started really learning about Bitcoin in 2021. I read the Bitcoin Standard. I started buying Bitcoin in 2022. The Bitcoin Standard really answered a lot of questions that I had before buying Bitcoin. It's not the most interesting. It's not the most fun read, but it's very, very interesting. I would say it's very the first time you read it, because there's so many. It's such a dense topic. It's a little difficult to get through, but if you get through it, it's so rewarding. And that's exactly what led me to Bitcoin. It made me start buying. I had a friend who was in Bitcoin for quite a long time. I think it was 2012, 2011. In, I believe, 2022, around when Bitcoin had its first drop in June. I first started speaking with him, and then we I guess we hung out more. We spent more time together. Like, we talked more about Bitcoin. We discussed our thoughts. I gave him my thoughts. He gave me his thoughts. And I think he was one of the main reasons why I was orange pilled by 2023. 2023, I was just fully thinking, okay, there's nothing else. That was the moment. That was when I completely flipped. But before that, I was still thinking Bitcoin is just part of a diversified portfolio. You still need real estate, stocks, all that. But eventually, I got to it. I figured it out. And not to say that I know everything, not at all. I'm not an expert on this by any means. There are certain things that I understand, but then there are other things that I really don't. I think that the evidence is pretty compelling to say that Bitcoin is probably going to do very well in the next few years. And I think eventually it would be money.
Okay, wow. 2023, that would have been a great time, right? That's when it was dipping, bottoming out. It's crazy because I think back to 2017, 2018, myself, other people thinking, oh, we're late, this thing is skyrocketing. But with Bitcoin's volatility comes opportunity as well. So even in 2022, 2023, you had a great entry point. And do you remember the first time you actually bought Bitcoin? Where were you? What was the price at the time? And what was going through your mind?
So the first time I bought it, I before that I was buying the Canadian ETFs, and I didn't really like them that much. They were charging a fee. You don't really understand what Bitcoin is if you buy the ETFs. Of course, it doesn't give you the same functionality. The first time I actually bought Bitcoin was somewhere around 38,000 US dollars. It was around 50,000 Canadian. Something like that. I bought $10 worth. I'm in Canada, of course. I bought $10 worth, and then it dropped. People would have probably said, "Oh, you're stupid for buying. You're so dumb for buying. Why'd you buy at 38,000, 36,000 when you could have bought at 16,000?" But at the end of the day, that price is now. Bitcoin's fallen more than that price in the last maybe month and a half. So, I think buying at any, just a side note, buying at any price is fine. But the first time I bought, it was actually a result of a real estate client. So I used to be a real estate agent. I just wanted to try it out, see how sales would work. I was working at a bank before that. I was a fixed income analyst. One of my clients was a younger guy. He had a lot of Bitcoin and he wanted to buy a house. And he told me, download this app, use my referral code. I used it. We both got a little bit of Bitcoin. And then after that, I started buying. before that, I didn't really take the step. He kind of pushed me into it. He kind of got me to do it. There's a lot of people along the way that really helped. Seyfedina Moose, that real estate client, the other guy who I was telling you about that understood Bitcoin since like 2011. A lot of people along the way, but eventually I guess I got to this point where, I mean, most of the questions that I had were answered. I think the Bitcoin standard leaves you probably with more questions than answers. And then once you dive into those answers, you start figuring it out more. And then there's other books that Seyfedina has written, the Bitcoin standard, fiat standard, principles of economics. Now he has a new one, but all of them answer different questions, and they make it more obvious that Bitcoin is the thing that we want. The first time I bought it, I don't remember where I was, but I remember why I bought that for the first time.
Gotcha. And what initially held you back there? So you had done this research, read the books, you were really understanding it, gave a lot of information, you had more questions, but what held you back, and why did it take your friend pushing you to ultimately for you to pull the trigger?
I honestly don't know. I think it was just because I felt like I didn't know enough. I think that's mostly what it is. Most people, because a lot of people book one-on-one meetings with me, and the thing that they want to ask about is there's usually just one question that they have. How do I start buying? Which exchange do I use? You can go on YouTube and you can search, but I mean, I feel like most people are trying to make a sale. Most people are just trying to convince you to go through their affiliate link. I mean, nothing wrong with affiliate links, but I guess it gets rid of some of the trust. The way that I do it is I don't do affiliate links at all. I don't touch affiliate links. I don't know which brokerage may end up doing the wrong thing, who may have some kind of issues in the background where maybe I could be at fault for pushing this client to that brokerage. So the way that I did it was I only do the actual services that I provide. I tell them buy from any exchange, and as long as you're taking self-custody, it doesn't really matter. The fees may matter. If you pay like 10% fees versus, let's say, 1.1%, of course that matters. But most main exchanges don't charge crazy fees. So in general, I don't really think that it matters which exchange you buy from. You can buy from any exchange as long as you take self-custody, you're good to go. And that's the thing that most people are held back by. And that's what I was held back by. The fact that I didn't know which exchange to buy from, which exchange to trust. That's a problem because it's so confusing. It's almost like analysis paralysis. You start doing the research. It's not the most fun topic to do research on. And then once you start doing it, it makes you want to go to sleep. Most people don't have that mind that gets them to want to research exchanges. Who wants to research exchanges? That's the most boring topic ever. So this guy, he gave me a suggestion. I just went with it, and I've actually been with them since then.
Gotcha. So knowing all that, what's your recommendation? Is it just like just dive in, just go for it, and then learn along the way?
Even if you start with Coinbase, I mean, I don't care. Start with something, take self-custody. Over time, once you start buying Bitcoin, you're going to want to do more research on it. And then there are going to be other exchanges that come up that may be better for you, and maybe you'll put in the time and research to learn about them, or maybe you'll see them enough times that that's what you want to use. So for example, one of the exchanges that I've heard of, I'm not in the US, but a lot of the people who watch my content are from the US. One of the exchanges that I recommend to Americans is River, because they have proof of reserves. I don't have an affiliate link with them or anything like that. Nothing like that. I don't make any money from telling people to go with River. I don't think of it that way. My goal is just to make sure that people don't get screwed over.
Gotcha. And apart from the Bitcoin standard and your friend, what other people or resources really shaped your early understanding of Bitcoin that you think are still useful today?
A lot of podcasts. I listened to a lot of Bitcoin University, Robert Breedlove, Preston Pish. Seyfedina Moose has the book, The Bitcoin Standard. And then he has a podcast, the Bitcoin Standard podcast, or just if you search for Seyfedina's name on YouTube, you'll find him. But those deep dives and conversations between people, like the conversation that we're having today, those deep dives and conversations with people that I listened to made a huge difference. I think another very useful resource is listening to debates between people who are for and against Bitcoin. So, for example, you can find a lot of debates between gold bugs and Bitcoiners, and that's probably the best way to start, because then you hear people telling you why they don't believe in Bitcoin, and then you can start pinpointing why it doesn't make any sense. You have to do the research. It takes time. It takes time to get through it. It takes time to get through all the reasoning. I mean, there are so many things that hold people back from just buying Bitcoin, not even just the exchange. People think it's a Ponzi scheme. People think it's a pyramid scheme. All these things, in those debates, you hear all of that, and you see how the people who are for Bitcoin give a rebuttal.
Right. And it's great to like have to, or to be able to hear people's logic behind that, as opposed to just looking at a headline on, let's say, like CNBC that says, "Oh, this thing's a Ponzi scheme," without really the explanation. You get, on a 2-hour podcast or whatever it is, a debate, you're going to hear people's reasoning and things like that. So it's great. And it's entertaining, like you mentioned. Look up a Peter Schiff, Michael Saylor debate or something like that. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, any voices or accounts on social media that you consider essential to learning about Bitcoin?
I think it depends on which platform you're on. I feel like on Twitter, it's mostly just noise at this point. People are just giving you their emotions, at least from what I've seen. There is some value here and there. A lot of people do post like useful content. YouTube, I think, is much better because YouTube has long form content that you can pay attention to and you can focus on and you can try to come to your own conclusions with. You can read the comments. Of course, you can read the comments on Twitter as well, but on YouTube, I feel like there's more in-depth analysis, better analysis, people doing more research. You see different trends. Like you see, for example, you can block somebody who is always creating clickbait content. Or you can focus on people who create actual content. And there's a lot of people who go just deep dives into multiple different topics. So I personally like YouTube more. Like I said before, the Bitcoin Standard, Preston Pish. I think the way that I make my content, I try to make it as useful in this way as possible. I try to make it entertaining as well. I try to combine what's happening in the world with the content. But I feel like there are a few accounts that you'll get to. Once you find one of them, YouTube starts suggesting the others.
Great. All right. Well, we all know whoever bought Bitcoin in 2022, 2023 has done really well up until now. But what's the biggest mistake or loss you've taken in your Bitcoin journey? And how did you rebuild from that?
So in the beginning, when I had just started really looking into Bitcoin and I was just starting to buy, this was in 2023. I thought for some reason that I was smarter than the market and I thought that Bitcoin would come back down. I thought I would be able to buy lower because I had people around me saying that, oh, it's going to 11K. I saw a bunch of YouTube videos where people are saying, oh, it's going to 10K, 11K, 12K. Don't buy yet. So I bought, it's an ETF, BITI, I believe, short Bitcoin ETF, and I lost money.
Is there more, or how did you bounce back from that?
So what I did to bounce back, I kind of had to let go of my ego. I had to understand that Bitcoin's bigger than me. I can't stop it from working the way that it's supposed to. And then I think I learned that. So that friend that I was mentioning, he mentioned it to me. He said, "You buy Bitcoin at the price you deserve," and it really clicked. I deserve to lose money with that short. That money shouldn't have been mine because I didn't understand Bitcoin. I thought that I should have made money from it and I thought I could outsmart the market. But in reality, the best strategy is buy and hold. You don't need all these other crazy strategies. You don't need to short the market. You don't need to buy and sell. You don't need to trade in and out. None of that is going to make as big of a long-term difference as just buying and holding. Just continuously buying, continuously purchasing, continuously creating value, and exchanging that value for Bitcoin. So you earn whatever you can, and then just buy Bitcoin with it. Timing the market is extremely difficult. It's a waste. It almost feels like a waste of time now.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather just buy Bitcoin whenever I have extra fiat because, I mean, to me, fiat is just a melting ice cube. The longer you hold your melting ice cube, the more the chances are that you're not going to find a freezer to put that ice cube in. You need to find assets to put your US dollars in. Bitcoin is one of those assets. And I mean, at the end of the day, US dollars are just pieces of paper. They can be printed out of nothing. You can't print more Bitcoin. So the way that I see it, and the way that I guess changed my perspective and I guess evolved as a Bitcoiner was I learned that you just buy at any price. You create value, focus on creating value, focus on your craft. It doesn't really matter what the price of Bitcoin is at the time when you buy, just keep buying.
What would you say to those who are convinced that Bitcoin runs through 4-year cycles? So therefore you can time it and there are better times to buy it and there are more risky times to buy it.
I mean, if you get lucky here and there, then that's perfectly fine. I don't know if that's going to continue though. If you got lucky 3 cycles in a row, you might be very, very confident it's going to happen again. And that's perfectly fine. What if it does? I mean, that's okay. If the price falls, that's okay with me. I don't plan to sell my Bitcoin regardless. I plan to hold my Bitcoin for the next 10, 15, 20 years, as long as I can, as long as I need to hold on to it to become financially free. I'm perfectly okay with that. If people want to trade in and out and they want to try to time the market, then go for it. The issue is that if you mess up once, let's say, for example, there are people who sold their Bitcoin at 81K. Now Bitcoin's at 91K. How stressed must they be? I'd be extremely stressed thinking I had to pay taxes. So let's say, for example, you bought at 16K, sold at 81K because you freaked out and you thought, okay, the beginning of the bear market has this is the beginning of the bear market.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to pay 30% in taxes. So what are your capital gains on that? So 16 to 80, that would be 64K, and then let's say 25% of that, you'd be paying like 16K in taxes. So your cost base is basically doubled.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're watching Bitcoin rebound. I don't know if it'll go higher than this. Who knows? Maybe it'll keep falling after this, but you're watching that happen. I mean, it's not free. Trading in the markets is not, the returns that you get are not free. You have to deal with the volatility. If you're dealing with the price going up right now, you're probably having a heart attack. You need Bitcoin's price to drop way, way lower before you can buy back. So in this case, you'd need Bitcoin's price to drop from the 81K that you sold at to like 64K for you to actually start making a profit, and then it needs to go even lower for you to actually feel good about yourself. So you're waiting for Bitcoin to go to 50K, but now it's doing the exact opposite of what you expected.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But there's some people who sold at 120, for example, and there's some people in 2021 who maybe sold at 60, right? And then potentially bought back in at whatever it was, 20, 30, maybe even 16K.
Yeah, but the problem is, what if that doesn't happen again? What if they sold at 120, they paid the taxes, so they need Bitcoin to go. Let's say, for example, this is right now, whatever the price is the break even for them. Do they buy right now, or do they keep waiting? What if they end up being wrong? So let's say, for example, Bitcoin does go back to 120K and they haven't bought back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now they've already lost 25%. And if they started, let's say, with 10 Bitcoin, now they have 7.5 Bitcoin, 8 Bitcoin. They could have, it could have worked out, but what if it doesn't? That's what I'm saying. The market is always going to try to find the path of most pain. I think most people right now think that there's a 4-year cycle. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the most pain is breaking that 4-year cycle. At some point that's going to happen. That 4-year cycle is not going to continue forever. I think the cycles are now shorter, and I think they're not as, they're volatile, but they're not dropping as much and they're not increasing as much because there's enough people who are willing to sell their Bitcoin when the price goes too high, and then there are enough people who want to buy Bitcoin when the price goes too low.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask, what's the best argument you've heard for the 4-year cycle no longer continuing, or the best argument you may have for that?
Definitely institutions. They're a different kind of buyer. They're not emotional. They don't look at the price going down and think, oh, I need to sell my holdings. Some of them do, but the majority of them don't think that way. BlackRock. So if we think about how BlackRock's been accumulating Bitcoin for their customers, I'm assuming that a lot of their customers are buying because of maybe financial advisors. Some of them are buying on their own, but a lot of them are probably like the ones who are buying because of financial advisors. They're not going to sell if the price goes down. Their financial advisor, if the advisor does a good job, they're going to tell them, hey, don't sell, just hold. It'll be fine. If they're doing it themselves, they're probably Bitcoiners and they're thinking this volatility is going to keep happening, so I'm not going to sell. A very small number of people who hold the BlackRock ETFs are selling their Bitcoin. So I think that the institutional buyers the financial advisors that are telling their customers to buy, they've changed the game. They're informing people, like the people who are buying now are informed of what's happening with Bitcoin. They're informed of how investments work. They're okay with volatility. Before, the blow off tops were created by people who, let's say, over leveraged. They borrowed money to buy Bitcoin. They borrowed money against their house. And then the bottoms, the 70, 80% drawdowns were also created by the same people who, let's say, they over leveraged and then the price goes down and they think, oh no, I need to sell my Bitcoin. I need to pay off this debt. I can't lose more money. They sell at the very bottom. And then at the top, when the buyers run out, the price starts coming down. At the bottom, when the sellers run out, the price starts coming back up. So it's just a result of either buyers or sellers running out. That's what markets are, essentially. They're fueled by emotions. But right now, I think those emotions aren't having as big of an impact because the institutional investors are in. So MicroStrategy constantly buying Bitcoin. They don't care what the price is. There's other institutions that are coming in to buy Bitcoin and they don't care what the price is. There are now sovereign wealth funds that are saying that they bought Bitcoin. Texas bought Bitcoin, $10 million worth of the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF, and I think they bought near the bottom. Harvard said they bought like $400 million worth of Bitcoin. It's insane. They've been buying Bitcoin consistently. I think if these institutions were here, we would probably already be down 50, 60% from the top. And I don't even think 126K would have been reached. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Let's see. But even then, I mean, there's another angle. The people who are selling now, maybe they wouldn't have sold if the institutions didn't come. So this rotation is happening, but it's moving into the people. So the Bitcoin is moving into people's hands who are not planning to sell for a very, very long time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, institutions are definitely here. I mean, if we start with you started talking about the Treasury companies. There have been some that have sold. You can argue that okay, those are just a tourist, and the really meaningful player, MicroStrategy, right? It's likely not going to sell. But we've also been getting some mixed messages there, where I think Saylor himself has even come out and said, if he has to sell the Bitcoin, he would sell some Bitcoin. But that would be in a very extreme, situation. I think he was just, honestly and candidly answering the question. But it is still a possibility. Anything could happen. And I think so. I don't think you were doing this, but some people conflate, BlackRock's clients buying IBIT or someone on their Robinhood account just because anyone can buy IBIT who has a brokerage account, at least in the U.S. and some other places. But some people conflate that with actually like BlackRock doing the buying, right? They're like, oh, BlackRock's sucking in all this Bitcoin. And then, in October or November, when we had this massive pullback, I mean, there was a lot of rapid selling, right? So, it's not necessarily BlackRock buying. Maybe the sovereign wealth funds and the college and the university endowments would be, less likely to sell, more long-term hodlers. But if there ever is a case where one of these major players, including MicroStrategy, does come out and say, hey, we're selling, how do you think that could, potentially impact sentiment and therefore impact the price of Bitcoin as well?
I think what he said is kind of taken out of context. What he was referring there to, so when he said that he would sell Bitcoin if he needs to, I think what he was referring to there is if they have no other option. So let's say nobody wants to buy their stock anymore for whatever reason. I don't know what the reason. Let's say the stock goes to zero. Nobody wants to buy it anymore. I don't know what the reason for that would be.
Bitcoin would have to go to zero.
Exactly, right. I don't think Bitcoin's going to go to zero. So if Bitcoin goes to zero, then how are
then
they going to
sell Bitcoin either?
They can't sell their, exactly. So I think the context there is that he was saying how the amount of shares they have to sell into the market to service the preferred shares that they're selling is a very small fraction of the total amount of volume in their stock for, like, let's say, for example, for a day or for the entire, I think it was for a day. He was saying 3 billion. So I think 3 billion is for the day. He was also saying that if they have to, so let's say, for example, there's not enough volume on their stock, they can start selling Bitcoin. And with Bitcoin, the market is even bigger. There's even more volume. So if they were to sell, let's say, a small amount of their Bitcoin into the market, the total volume for the day is like 50 billion, and they would only need to sell, let's say, $100 million worth. So the percentage of the total volume that they're selling is very, very small. If they were to sell more preferred shares, again, they'd be selling a small amount. But the point there was that they will sell it if they have to avoid going bankrupt. But I don't think that they're necessarily going to sell their Bitcoin. And the reason for that is they sold enough shares. Sorry, did I? I think I said their shares, but their Bitcoin. I don't think they're going to sell their Bitcoin. But the reason for that is that they, over the last 2 weeks, they actually accumulated a $1.4 billion. I would call it an emergency fund. So they accumulated a $1.4 billion emergency fund in case they can't sell their shares, in case they can't sell their Bitcoin. They have this cash sitting there to fund their preferred dividends. So I think they're good. And that's going to cover them for 21 months.
Yeah, I was going to say at least for the next 18, 20 months. And it was a better option than, keeping people on the edge about will they sell the Bitcoin, will they not? It's a better option to take than putting yourself in a position where you'd have to sell the Bitcoin. Because I don't think in any situation that would be good if MicroStrategy has to sell some Bitcoin.
And worst case, I mean, they can sell more preferreds to fund I mean, I don't think that they're going to have to sell their Bitcoin. I don't even think that's going to be. I don't think they're going to get to that point.
Yeah, it's very, very unlikely. Anything is possible, but it's very unlikely. We can put it in that camp. And I would also say, like, if you're long MicroStrategy and along Bitcoin too, because this would affect sentiment, I don't think you'd ever want them to sell any Bitcoin. Like, that would not be a good day for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'd agree.
MicroStrategy, right?
Yeah, I'd agree.
And then selling more preferreds, because the whole point of raising the cash is either to buy Bitcoin, but they wouldn't sell Bitcoin to buy Bitcoin. So if you're selling the Bitcoin, or if you need to raise cash for Bitcoin, or if you need to sell Bitcoin to raise cash, it's so you can pay the dividends on the preferreds. So selling preferreds to pay the dividends on the preferred, that to me brings this whole circular thing back up. It's like, yeah, you can't, that's where it gets a little sketchy.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, if that's the case, then wouldn't the entire global financial system be a Ponzi scheme? Because that's exactly what the U.S. government is doing.
Well, let's focus on one thing.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it would be a Ponzi scheme.
What wrong doesn't make and I'm not saying that's not what MicroStrategy is doing. They have not done that. They have not done that.
Yeah,
it's just, you mentioned they might be able to sell some.
People say it on Twitter all the time.
That's not what. Yeah, that's not what they're doing. Actually, their business model is very interesting. What they're building out, and Saylor is, I believe, a lot of steps ahead of most of it. So what he's building and has been designing here over even a year ago, when they were just doing convertible notes, using their ATM, no one was talking about preferreds, right? And even when they were just doing the convertible notes, no one was talking about an ATM, right? So he's just a couple steps ahead. I do think he is building something. It's hard to build anything. I mean, you need a lot of things to go in your favor. But if this works out for him, he could be building one of the most powerful businesses. And I'm just playing a little devil's advocate here as well. I'm not saying I'm definitely not short MicroStrategy. Okay, and yesterday was probably a buying opportunity, by the way, when it hit 156 or whatever.
No, completely agree. I get what you're saying. I'm just going the opposite way, right? Like, if people are saying that MicroStrategy is a Ponzi scheme for doing that, then the entire global financial system should be collapsing because the US dollar is a Ponzi scheme. That's just my point, right? So what the US government is doing right now is they have let's say, I think $1.1 trillion in interest payments that they have to make every month on their debt, and they're just borrowing more money to pay the interest. So they're using a credit card to pay off a credit card, and then they're getting another credit card to pay off that second credit card, and then they're getting another credit card to pay off that third one. It's just they're kicking the can down the road. So what MicroStrategy is doing is exactly the same thing, but to buy Bitcoin. The U.S. government is essentially wasting a lot of the money. They're consuming with a lot of the money that they're borrowing, but MicroStrategy is buying this productive asset. I consider it productive. They're buying the best money in the world, and they're using debt to do that. So I would say this is a speculative attack on fiat. I think this is the exact situation that the U.S. government has put everybody in, because what they're doing is they're buying this asset that gives them a 30-50% return whatever the return is. I know in the last little while it hasn't been like that, but I think that that'll rise again, and that's perfectly fine if your audience, let's say, doesn't agree with me. I think that the return will go to 30 to 50% again, and they're borrowing money at 10% to buy that asset. So I think that what they're doing is extremely smart. And if people who don't like them as a company, who don't like the strategy, they don't like it, that's perfectly fine.
That's true. Yeah, you don't have to buy it. And yes, over the long run, Bitcoin's CAGR should outpace the 10% that they'll have to pay. So yeah, if you can stay in the game over the long run, makes a lot of sense if you're not just here as a tourist. And I think of course Strategy and Michael Saylor have proven that over the years. They're in this for the long. He's all in. He's all in. Right. Yeah. We're kind of speaking of sort of like what could be a potential like doomsday scenario. I'm curious from your end, have you personally had or have heard of any Bitcoin horror stories, a moment where just everything went wrong or a major lesson that still sticks with you today that you would like to pass along?
Like for an individual that, let's say, like, are you just saying any stories that I've
Yeah, on an
seen
individual
people?
level, or
Okay,
that you've experienced personally or that you've heard of.
so I personally haven't had that big of an issue. I mean, I sent the wrong address to someone; they sent Bitcoin to that address, but it wasn't that much. There's another story that I have. It was a client of mine who they booked one meeting with me. We didn't really go too into detail about their security. They wanted to ask other questions. But more recently, I found out that he was sending Bitcoin to the wrong address, and he didn't have access to that address. So let's say, set up a wallet. He wiped it. He wrote down the seed phrase. He wiped it, and I don't know what exactly happened, but Ledger something happened along the way. There was a problem where that seed phrase was no longer valid. He wrote down the seed phrase for the wrong wallet, and he was sending the Bitcoin to another wallet. So he was sending it to a completely different address with a different seed phrase. And he tried to move his Bitcoin. He wanted to move it from a Ledger to a cold card or something along the lines. The Ledger had some kind of issue, and he he tried to recover his Bitcoin with his seed phrase, and it didn't work. So he no longer had access to that Bitcoin, and it was a significant amount of Bitcoin. And I mean, devastating. I think one of the things that you need to do when you're setting up your wallet, and this is something I tell people all the time, if you set up your wallet, try to send a small transaction to that wallet, wipe it, and then try to recover that address or that wallet. If you can recover it and the Bitcoin is still there, then you have full control over it. If you can, also try to send that Bitcoin maybe to another wallet. Let's say you download Aqua Wallet on your phone or some other wallet on your phone. Send that Bitcoin to that other wallet. See if you have full control over it, and then you feel safe. If you can't send the Bitcoin from that wallet, then that Bitcoin is not yours. If you can't recover it, that Bitcoin is not yours. It's gone forever.
Yeah, that's devastating. I'm sorry to hear that. Has he bounced back? When did this happen? Was this recently? Was this a while ago? And yeah, how's he doing? How did he recover from that?
This was a couple months ago. I haven't really talked to him after that. He was trying to figure it out. I'm sure he's going through it.
Okay, well, it's good. It's good. At least you were just sharing there, different ways to approach that. So
Yeah,
that problem isn't repeated. Hopefully.
that's the
Um,
most important thing. Once you make a mistake, learn from it, move on. Don't keep thinking about the mistake. That's not going to do anything. Just learn from it and try to fix the mistake going forward.
yeah. Good advice. We were talking about Bitcoin treasury companies. Lots of these Bitcoin treasury companies have essentially been amplified Bitcoin. People invest in them for a higher return. Have you personally had any memorable experiences with BTC treasury stocks, good or bad, that has basically shaped how you see them today?
So I think I first bought MSTR when it was at 164 before the massive run up. I saw it run up, and then it came right back down. I basically went through, like, it was heartbreaking seeing it go up to like $550, then coming back down to these prices. I mean, it's kind of made me want to just stick to Bitcoin. just hold Bitcoin. I was also watching. There's a guy that I like his content. His name is Ben Workman.
Okay, yeah.
So he was, I think he was running Saquon's Bitcoin Treasury company, and they sold their Bitcoin. That was very, very unfortunate. Nakamoto,
Oh gosh.
huge company. They even sponsored the Vegas Bitcoin conference,
Yeah.
and they're down like 97, 98% in terms
Yeah.
of, I mean, in terms of dollars. So they're down even more in terms of Bitcoin. Absolutely insane. There's so much value just lost because I think a lot of these companies were trying to copy MicroStrategy from what I see. They're trying to copy MicroStrategy. They're trying to recreate the playbook, and it doesn't really seem to be working.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them use pipes, right? A lot of them use pipe offerings. MicroStrategy never did that. The pipes benefit those who are able to invest in the pipes before.
Can you explain the pipes? I actually I don't fully know what they are. Maybe you seem like you know.
Yeah, so it's basically private investors get to invest in these in the companies prior to
Oh,
the
right.
deal going public.
Oh, like a
Um,
pre-mine.
excuse me?
Like a pre-mine.
Yeah, if you're making a crypto analogy there. So, but they typically come with they'll come with unlocks like a holding period, right? So you can't sell your shares until a certain amount of time.
Oh, right. Okay.
And so typically when the deal's announced, there's a lot of hype around it, but there isn't a lot of float in the stock yet. And so because of all the hype, you get this run up. But when that date eventually comes, the unlock date, the unlock period, those early investors are likely looking to cash out. And so you'll
Yeah, at
get
like
these
20x,
massive
30x.
sell-offs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, we saw a lot of that this summer. But yeah, for example, you're talking about how a lot of these companies showed up or trying to copy the MicroStrategy playbook. But when MicroStrategy started this, they started with some free cash flow from the original software business, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to start, right? Because the
Yep.
whole idea it's based on like, hey, we have this cash. We're saying it's a melting ice cube. Why don't we put it in Bitcoin, this thing that we think is going to go up forever? And then you develop some other creative ways, but um, yeah, the pipes don't work that way.
Yeah. See that probably it's probably scarred a lot of people for life, and I don't think that they're gonna go back to. I think in general, the Bitcoin treasury companies. I mean, I don't know if they'll outperform Bitcoin. Doesn't seem like they will. I think in general, the safest strategy is just buy Bitcoin, keep it in self custody. Let's say, for example, let's say your goal is to get to 1 Bitcoin, or your goal is to get to like 0.5, 0.25, whatever it is. After that, maybe you can start putting, I don't know, 5% of your portfolio into it. Or let's say, for example, you have a locked in account, you can't really do anything else with it. You can put it into a Bitcoin ETF, or you can try to outperform Bitcoin. The amount of risk that you're taking by having your money in a locked in account is huge because you don't know if it'll be confiscated. You don't know if it'll be there in like 30, 20, 25, 30 years. Um, you don't even know if it'll be worth anything at that point. What if the account isn't even worth anything? What if taxes are so high that you get nothing out of it? So, I mean, the way that I see it, I mean, maybe a lot of people don't see it this way. The way that I see it, I mean, those are almost like they're like gambling accounts to me because it's so far out. You have no idea if the accounts will still be there. What if the accounts, like, what if all the benefits for those accounts are removed by the government? How do you even know that's not going to happen? What if those accounts are confiscated from you by your government? What if they're blocked off? What if the IRS, the CRA say, oh, you can't access these anymore? So the way that I see it, Bitcoin in cold storage is like the main pot. That's where you put your day-to-day savings. And then if you have a locked in account, if you have an account that money is stuck in, maybe in that you can buy Bitcoin treasury companies. That's what I personally did. I bought MicroStrategy in my locked in account.
Okay, so you're not 100% Bitcoin at this point. You still have some MicroStrategy. Do you have other stocks as well, or
No, I mean, I wouldn't even say, to me, that MicroStrategy doesn't even count.
okay?
I don't really see it. I don't really see it as part of my net
Gotcha,
worth
gotcha,
because I'm not able to access it for another like 30 years.
gotcha, gotcha. Um, I'm curious how. So we saw October to November. Bitcoin fell well over 20% from the highs. You come from a traditional finance background. 20% drawdown is would clearly qualify as a bear market. But in Bitcoin, we expect volatility. So, in your experience living through multiple Bitcoin cycles, how do you personally recognize when we're in an extended downturn versus just a shakeout?
I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter. I don't care. I mean, it's probably. I think. I think every drawdown is eventually going to get bought up with Bitcoin. Bitcoin runs out at every price, so no matter what the price is, eventually it's going to be a rounding error. So I mean, it's possible that we go lower. It could be a shakeout. It could be an extended drawdown. I haven't really personally focused on that. I don't really care. I mean, I plan to hold my Bitcoin no matter what. I
Mm-hmm.
plan to keep buying Bitcoin no matter what. I plan to keep creating more value over time, and every month I plan to create more value than I consume. So I don't really care what happens to Bitcoin, if it's a drawdown, a shakeup, whatever it ends up being. I'm going to buy no matter what. So I really haven't put in the time to focus on that.
Gotcha. Okay. Does what we're experiencing now feel like anything you've experienced in the past in terms of this drawdown, any of the past drawdowns that you've lived through?
No. So the previous drawdowns in Bitcoin, I think the bears weren't as confident.
Interesting.
This time, I think they seem very, very confident. They seem like I'm getting so much hate. I've had to mute so many accounts on X, even on YouTube. So many comments that are negative. Bitcoin's going to 30K. Bitcoin's going to 20K. When Bitcoin went to 75K last time, I didn't get these kinds of comments. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's going to go to 70K. It's going to go to 60K." Um, Nobody was saying 30K, 20K, 15K, 10K. I mean, there was a very, very small percentage, but now it seems like there's a lot more people who are bearish, way more, like significantly more. So I think that's the trap. I think there are so many people who have sold because they thought they were going to have the 4-year cycles, and who knows? Maybe I'm getting set up for a bull trap. I don't really consider that to be the case though, because Bitcoin's always going to go up. But if you're on the sidelines when Bitcoin rises, you're screwed. So like all these people who are so confident about Bitcoin, they're thinking it's going to go to $5, $10, $1,000, $10,000, whatever. If they're stuck on the sidelines and they can't buy back, and they sold at the bottom, like we mentioned before, they need a massive drawdown from here to even break even. But Bitcoin is the most painful asset to hold
Hmm.
or to be on the sidelines with. You might expect it to go down and it doesn't. You might expect it to go up and then it goes sideways. It's always just going to put you through this emotional roller coaster. So I think, I mean, to me, the people who think that they're smart usually they're just part of the herd,
Gotcha.
right?
Well,
And they're thinking that it'll go down, but maybe I don't know if it will. I don't personally think it will.
gotcha. Let's look a little bit more ahead here. So, with your traditional finance background and as a CFA, you understand how important interest rates are to asset prices. So, looking ahead to 2026, how do you see Bitcoin performing in an environment where we have a potentially hawkish Fed who's in place now, but is currently operating or is operating alongside the influence of a sort of shadow Fed chair? Appointed by a president who clearly wants extremely low interest rates.
I think that interest rates are pretty much a way to manipulate asset prices upward. It almost feels like they are always too late with adjusting rates. So in the past, the markets have usually collapsed right after interest rates are lowered. I think if you look at the history from 2007 to 2009, whenever they lowered interest rates or whenever they had the last rate cut is when the market was at its top. So I'm not sure if that's happening this time. The way that I see it, I think a lot of people, a lot of wealthy, like this is that portion of froth where the markets just go run up to extreme highs. And then who knows, once there's so much inflation, let's say inflation goes back to 7-8%, people are really wealthy from their assets. They start spending more into the economy. Prices go up. We run out of supply. Uh, supply chains get messed up for whatever reason, something happens, I don't know what could happen. At that point, they start increasing interest rates again, and then everything crashes. I don't know. I mean, it's all so difficult. At the end of the day, when you're a Bitcoiner, it doesn't really matter. Interest rates mean nothing at this point. I mean, I don't. All I know is that eventually, the institutions that are offering Bitcoin-backed loans are probably going to lower the rates that they offer. I don't know what the Fed is going to do. I don't know what the market is going to do as a result of the Fed lowering interest rates. Everything is always just crazy, right? When you expect interest rate, when you expect prices to go up, they go up slightly and then they fall. When you expect prices to fall, they go down slightly and then you rise. It's always just a game.
It's like, should we just do the opposite of what we think is going to happen?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I've been terrible at making short-term estimates, so I don't even personally think anybody should listen to my short-term. I think the long-term, though, we're going to do great.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. You've also talked about, speaking of long-term, you've also talked about, the idea of retiring on Bitcoin. What's the story or set of personal experiences that have made you believe that that's possible and that even 0.1 Bitcoin will be huge, which you've talked about?
So the 0.1 Bitcoin will be huge. I think that's more speculative. I think that the demand is going to rise massively from where it is today. If you ask the people around you to, let's say, explain the difficulty adjustment, 99% would have no idea. Most people don't actually understand Bitcoin. Some of them buy Bitcoin, but they buy it because they want more dollars. And as more people understand Bitcoin, as they figure it out, they're going to want as much as they can. I personally have never met a single person who understands Bitcoin and doesn't want more. So when people figure out Bitcoin, they're obviously going to want more. I think right now, maybe 1% of people actually own Bitcoin, maybe 2 to 3 to 5%, something like that. But a very, very, very small percentage of those people actually understand it. So over time, I think what's going to happen is people are going to figure it out. People are going to learn what it is, and it has that finite supply. 0.1 Bitcoin is 10 million Satoshis. There are only 21 million Bitcoin. So in total, 210 million people can have 0.1 Bitcoin out of the entire world. But then you have people like BlackRock, or you have institutions like BlackRock owning 775,000 Bitcoin on behalf of their clients. You have companies like MicroStrategy owning 650,000 Bitcoin on behalf of their shareholders or on behalf of their own company. Their shareholders are essentially funding their purchases, which is absolutely insane. And they can just buy as many as they want to. They can keep going. They can keep tapping into these capital markets and buying as many Bitcoin as they can or as they want to. And because of this, because I think that eventually the number of sellers at these prices will run out, I think Bitcoin's price is going to go much, much higher than where it is today. As more people figure out what it is, the price will go from 100K to a million to 10 million to 100 million. Eventually, you won't be able to exchange your Bitcoin for dollars anymore. And because of that, I think owning 10 million Satoshis, 0.1 Bitcoin is eventually going to change your life. I don't know when that's going to happen. I can't give you a timeline. It could take 10 years. It could take 5 years, depending on how quickly the US dollar hyperinflates and people want to leave it. Or it could take 50 years. And I think the key takeaway here should be accumulate Bitcoin and just keep accumulating. Instead of waiting for the market to come to you, instead of the price going up, accumulate as much as you can, focus on what you can control, bring the market to yourself. So if you can get to 0.1 Bitcoin, just keep stacking. If you get to 1 Bitcoin, you'll just be able to retire sooner.
Gotcha. A couple of follow-ups there. So you're talking about how, eventually as more people learn about Bitcoin, there's going to be this rush, and that's going to kind of, spit out of this price, this like violent move up. But my question around this is who doesn't know about Bitcoin? Like, can you say more about it? Because who doesn't know about Bitcoin? I feel like most people do. It's just that they've heard about these crazy stories and they're too scared to touch it, and so they don't even want to do that education piece of it to learn more about it, right? That would then convince them to buy it. That would lead to this, I think, sharp movement of more people knowing about it, more people being educated about it, and then wanting to buy it. So how do you see that actually taking place when there are a couple words that you could go anywhere in the world, maybe Coke, Apple, like most people have heard about Bitcoin, today. So how do you sort of think about that?
I mean, they've heard of it, but they haven't used it.
Yeah, what would lead them to then go use it? Why haven't like?
I don't think merchants are going to want US dollars anymore at some point, because US dollars can be printed. If a merchant's smart, like there are certain things that you're only going to be able to pay for with Bitcoin. I already know people who are willing to sell products and services for Bitcoin, and they don't want dollars. They just don't want them. And I think that that's going to spread. More and more merchants are going to get into that mindset where they don't want dollars anymore. They just want Bitcoin. I mean, it'll take time. It'll take a very long time. But even today, let's say, for example, most people don't even understand fiat. And that's perfectly fine. They're still using it. They have to use it. I think the root of where this use is going to start from is the institutions that push it. So let's say Vanguard. Today, they allowed their customers to buy Bitcoin ETFs. And they were saying for 2 years, they're not going to allow it. They will never do it. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. And today they bent the knee. And now think about it. How many people are... So the people you're mentioning, they've heard of it, but they've never interacted with it. They've never done anything with it. They haven't seen... Most of the people that I personally know, they see Bitcoin when it's going up, and then they forget about it. Some of them message me when it's going down. They ask me, "Oh, are you okay? Everything fine?" Or my Bitcoin's going down. Should I hold? They ask me those things, but then they don't really care about it. They haven't really put in the time to understand it. I think as more people figure it out, I mean, all we need is 21 million people who really, really want one Bitcoin. That's it. Out of 8 billion. Once those 21 million people are doing whatever they can to accumulate that one Bitcoin, what's the price going to? If every millionaire who has wealth in the legacy financial system wants Bitcoin, if they wanted one Bitcoin, they couldn't get to it. So I think, I don't think people understand it. I think people have heard of it, but they don't understand it.
Yeah, gotcha. Do you know how many people hold Bitcoin today?
No, I would say, I mean, based on just anecdotal evidence, if I were to ask people around me if I were in like a stadium or something and I asked people around me, if I asked every single person if they understand Bitcoin, I would probably assume that 95% or more would say that they don't.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I think I'm still just wondering like what's going to push them to that next level where they're going to say, okay, like actually I'll take some time to care about Bitcoin. And maybe it's the education piece and the institutions now sort of changing the narrative and, pushing it to their clients and things like that. But I guess that kind of leads me to my next point about, will it then not be looked at as more of an investment store value case as opposed to this medium of exchange? I'm trying to understand that a bit more. And even replacing the dollar entirely, you talked about that, from like, I'm wondering, as long as we live in a world that's, has a dominant nation state and fiat currencies, like, wouldn't there always be some level of demand to essentially convert Bitcoin back into the system to continue to transact, to invest in other things, or, just do your day-to-day, functions?
No, definitely possible. I mean, I think that countries can still have their own currencies. That's perfectly fine. But I'm talking about on a global level. You can move anywhere with your Bitcoin. You can go into that country and you can exchange your Bitcoin for whatever currency there is in that country. And people will be willing to give you that currency offline. You're not even have to go through a KYC exchange. You can meet people to get that currency if you really want to. And over time, I mean, the main point here is that you can exchange your Bitcoin for more and more of that currency over time because more and more currency is being printed. No matter what happens, you'll be able to buy, let's say today, you'll be able to buy a certain amount of currency in exchange for Bitcoin. And at some point, you'll be able to buy way, way more currency. So let's say today you can buy $100,000
with one Bitcoin, right? In the future, at some point, you can buy $1 million worth.
And then you'll be able to buy 10 million. Like at a point, the exchange rate, at least this is the way that I think of it, because there's infinite dollars. There's no limit to how many dollars can exist. At some point, the exchange rate for one Bitcoin is going to be so high that it's going to take wheelbarrows to get paid in exchange for your Bitcoin. Or to pay for things. The cost in terms of Bitcoin isn't going to go, it's going to keep falling, it's going to keep falling. But then if you want to buy it in terms of dollars, you're going to have to pay for it with wheelbarrows of cash. Or Let's say a loaf of bread will cost you $30. Going to the grocery store will cost you $3,000. At that point, I mean, either you can pay $3,000 or you can think of it as 3,000 Satoshis.
Yeah, I think at that point the system's just like we're gonna be in a totally different. Like if bread ever cost 3,000, like I don't know if we even get to that point.
At some point, that's the thing. At some point, I think we are going to get to that point because fiat currencies and Bitcoin can't survive together. They can't survive at the same time. Because Bitcoin is such a big threat to fiat, I don't think that they work. Because keep in mind that the value of Bitcoin can rise literally forever. We can have way more fiat currency in the system than we have today. The US dollar has lost 99% of its value. It'll lose another 99%.
But don't you need the fiat currency to at least transact? Because if you know all of this and you're holding Bitcoin, why would you use any of it to transact, right? Because you know they're just going to continue to debase, it's going to go up. And then on top of that, too, governments can assert some control here with taxes, right? Right now, if you sell your Bitcoin to transact or anything, you're going to pay taxes. Whereas if you just use fiat currencies, right, like you don't pay taxes.
I agree, but the way that I'm saying it is the way that I'm looking at it is, let's say you have a certain product that a merchant sells and they only want Bitcoin for it. I don't think the government can force them to take US dollars. Or if the government tries to force them, they'll just move to another country. I don't think anybody can prevent anybody else from using Bitcoin the way that they want to. You can only stop yourself from accumulating Bitcoin, from interacting with Bitcoin. You can't stop other people. Because even, let's say, for example, me and you, we're having this conversation, let's say offline. We transact in Bitcoin and we use Lightning and we use Liquid or something. How is the government going to find that transaction? I'm not saying that we're going to do that, but we could, and nobody could stop us, right? Let's say you're selling some kind of product, a digital product, or you have a community or something, and you only want to accept Bitcoin for it, and you're the only one who offers that. Am I just going to say, no, you have to accept dollars, or am I just not going to interact with you because you're not accepting dollars? No. I think at a point, the only high quality products are going to be priced in Bitcoin because fiat has no value. You can print more fiat. I think there's going to be enough merchants who figure that out.
Yeah, I guess that's the key part there. It's like
it'll take time, though. Of course.
When did people? Because it's like why isn't more evidence of that showing up even today? I think it's very clear. Like, okay, U.S. 38 trillion in debt. Like you said, we're paying back all this and so much in interest expense, so they have to print more in order to pay it back. And this is like the standard. So what about everywhere else? So like, but yet people aren't saying, hey, merchants aren't saying, hey, I'm only going to accept Bitcoin. But it's definitely an interesting idea. And related to this, wanted to also discuss, I think a lot of people have talked about this notion of, buying Bitcoin, holding for the long term. Once people buy it, these whales, especially, like they're not selling, but, we've recently seen quite a few so-called Bitcoin OGs and whales selling significant portions of their holdings, either to diversify or, simply to just have money that they can go spend. As Bitcoin continues to grow in purchasing power, won't that sort of selling naturally continue? It almost feels like a paradox, right? Bitcoin is about exiting the system, yet when many long-term holders accumulate Bitcoin up to the millions or even billions, they seem to want to just swap it back for a large chunk of fiat. So how do you reconcile with that dynamic? Like in theory, I understand what you're saying, and it makes sense. If you think this asset is going to keep going up forever because of all the dynamics that are happening behind the hood, you'd want to hold on. But that's not necessarily what we've seen play out in practice. So how can people who are thinking about accumulating today have confidence that this sort of selling pressure won't continue as the price of Bitcoin goes up, or as certain stakeholders accumulate large quantities of it?
I mean, you can't. I don't think that's possible. You can't have any assurance. In Bitcoin, the only thing that's assured is a supply. The only thing that's assured is the amount of Bitcoin that will ever exist. Other than that, we have no idea what's going to happen with selling. We have no idea if Satoshi Nakamoto is going to sell all their Bitcoin. We have no idea, right? We don't know. All we can rely on is knowing that there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. I can't predict when the sellers are going to sell. I can't predict when nation states are going to start selling. But the way that I see it, this is such a powerful asset that more and more of it is being bought by people who don't want to sell. That's what I'm relying on here. So every day, let's say 1% of the Bitcoin that's bought is never sold again. To me, that's progress. That's growth. That's why we see higher highs and higher lows. If that wasn't the case, let's say if people weren't buying Bitcoin and then putting it away forever, then we wouldn't see higher highs and higher lows. I think that the whales will continue selling. That's perfectly fine. They'll want to pay for their lives. They'll want to diversify. That's okay. And I think it's important to be able to live through that. I think it's important to be able to live through the volatility. But eventually, I've mentioned this before, eventually Bitcoin runs out at every price. So let's say there are people today who have 1,000 Bitcoin. Let's say they sell half of it at 100K, and then the price goes down. Are they going to, let's say the price goes to 50K, are they going to sell the other half at 50K? Maybe not. Maybe they'll wait for 200K. The point is that once you sell your Bitcoin, though, you can't resell the same Bitcoin again. So it was a state in Germany. Somebody corrected me. I said it was Germany that sells their Bitcoin. Somebody corrected me in my comments. They said it was a state in Germany that sold 50,000 Bitcoin. So they can sell their 50,000 Bitcoin, but they can't sell it again. They can only sell it once. If you have Bitcoin, you can only sell it once. If you're a whale, you have 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 Bitcoin. You can only sell it once. Once it's gone, it's gone. If you buy back at, let's say, a lower price, again, your next sell will probably be a little bit higher than whatever your first sell was for. So over time, Bitcoin's price, it runs out at every price because no matter what happens, there are people who are willing to buy at every price. So when Bitcoin was, let's say, 1,000 Bitcoin for a penny or $1 or whatever, at one point, you could buy 1,000 Bitcoin for $1. Then you could buy, once the supply at that price ran out, the people who bought it at that price aren't going to sell at the same price. They're going to sell when it goes higher. And that's, again, why we see higher highs and higher lows. Over time, it doesn't really matter if the whales sell. This is this redistribution. I think this is how the network grows. If we wanted to buy Bitcoin, if new people wanted to buy Bitcoin and nobody wanted to sell, then you'd probably be paying a lot more than whatever you're paying today. I think this is healthy.
Okay, and as we wrap here, I have two more questions. We talked about the volatility. We talked about retirement. How would you reply to someone who doubts the idea of a Bitcoin-based retirement, especially given the potentially large drawdowns that could create instability and uncertainty, unless someone already has millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin?
I mean, if you're buying Bitcoin for the short term, you're probably always going to end up.
But for retirement, if you're trying to retire,
that's what I mean. If you're buying for the short term, then you're always going to end up disappointed because you're always going to see Bitcoin's price being volatile. If you're buying for retirement, and retirement is, let's say, 20 years from here, I think you really have to understand the fundamentals. If nobody's willing to sell the Bitcoin, it's an inelastic asset. Nobody can increase the supply. So if nobody's willing to sell Bitcoin at a certain price, the supply runs out at every price in a very short period of time. So let's say it might take 4 years for all of the supply for the market to go through the amount of supply that's available at a certain price. It takes 4 years. Once that 4 years is done, the price goes a little higher. There's a leg up. If you take a look at 4-year periods, the 4-year moving average, it always goes up in terms of Bitcoin, in terms of US dollars for Bitcoin's price. It always goes up because Bitcoin's supply runs out every 4 years. So if you have a long time horizon, you're going to have the volatility, but dollar cost averaging through the volatility is probably to your biggest advantage, because what you can do is you can decrease your cost basis. I did a calculation where if somebody started buying Bitcoin, I believe it was in November 9th, 2021. I remember that because that was the top of Bitcoin's price. So if somebody started buying at November 9th and they kept buying till today and they kept buying, let's say, weekly, they'd be up like 140%, even though Bitcoin's price only increased by 20%. Because there is this volatility, you can use it to your advantage. If Bitcoin's price is really high, it means that you're buying, let's say you're buying at the top, but that means that the price will come down and you can decrease your average price. You can buy more Bitcoin if you really need to. But over time, I mean, just holding is probably the best strategy. Buying over time consistently as you create value is going to work really, really well for most people.
Yeah, the accumulation strategy, DCAing definitely makes sense. But how about once you get to retirement, though, right? So you've accumulated all this Bitcoin, you've done the DCA, you're in retirement. If you only have this Bitcoin stash, what if you during retirement get that large drawdown?
Yeah. So I think it's important that people understand the different strategies that they can use with Bitcoin. So for example, you could have an emergency fund with fiat, like strategy. I mean, I've been talking about emergency funds. I actually had a video where I went really deep into this, where I mentioned that people could have a 20% cash emergency fund. So their entire portfolio, let's say you retire, your entire portfolio is worth like $3 million. You could have, if you really want to, you could have $600,000 just sitting there in cash and $2.4 million in Bitcoin. You'll never run out of cash. If you, let's say, for example, if you put it into, you'll eventually run out of cash, but your Bitcoin will appreciate at a rate fast enough that you can keep replenishing it over time. That makes it so that, let's say Bitcoin's price does draw down, you can use the cash that you accumulated instead of having to sell your Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin's price does run up, you can sell some Bitcoin and you can replenish the cash in your portfolio. You can keep rebalancing. Eventually, your Bitcoin will have grown enough that I don't think that you'll be too worried.
Makes sense, yeah. And you could even potentially, just like you DCA'd in as you were working towards retirement, DCA out.
Yeah. Or you can borrow against your Bitcoin as well. You can take on loans against it. And as long as you take care of them, as long as you make sure that you're not over leveraged, it could work out pretty well.
Right. And you definitely wouldn't want it to be callable either.
Yes, right? Exactly.
So, okay, finally, when you imagine the future, Rajat, right, where even this 0.1 BTC matters in a huge way, what does that world look like to you? What experiences or knowledge makes you very confident in this vision?
I think that houses are no longer going to be used as a savings tool at that point. If 0.1 Bitcoin is like, let's say, a significant amount of value, because at that point, it means that so many people have adopted Bitcoin already. Maybe a lot of wealth has moved out of the real estate market into Bitcoin. And the reason why I say that is because real estate is really difficult to manage. It's a headache. You have tenants that you have to deal with. You have lawyer fees. You have realtor fees. You have property taxes. You have maintenance, repairs. You have all this liability. Let's say your tenant dies in your property. Now you have to pay their family. Their family can sue you, whatever. Like all these liabilities that you have to pay for, just everything that comes with owning a property. But you're doing it for other people now, and you have to keep increasing their rent. You have to keep telling them, hey, you need to pay me more. You need to pay me more. You need to pay me, even though you're offering nothing extra. I think that's a huge headache. I think a lot of people will not want to do that going forward. If we do go to a Bitcoin standard, I don't think people are going to do that. I think housing prices are going to probably fall to their utility value. And that's something that's huge to me. I'm a very strong proponent of that. I think that the only way to fix the cost of living crisis is to find a solution that provides the right incentives. And Bitcoin provides those right incentives. I think people are starved for volatility. I think people don't want stability. That's why they have, think about it. How many men gamble on sports? A lot of men. And I think that's because
becoming massive, yeah.
Right. And I think that's because life is way too stable. There's no, we get salaries, right? We know how much money there's no hunt to kill. People don't even want to do sales jobs. It's way too stable. I think men need volatility in their lives. And I think that's why they gamble. But what Bitcoin will do is it'll be that thing that has volatility. But if you hold on to it for long enough, you know that it's stability. So in the short term, it's volatile, but in the long term, it's very, very stable. And it'll give you that ability to plan for the future, because you'll know how much Bitcoin you need to, let's say, survive for the next 10, 15, 20 years. You know that, let's say, for example, your cost of living is 1 Bitcoin today. If you say that Bitcoin's price falls 50% and then it never goes up again, you can say you'll need, let's say, 2 Bitcoin. If you wanted to retire let's say you wanted to retire for the next 10 years, you can safely say that 20 Bitcoin will cover you. But you have no idea how many dollars will cover you, right? How do we know? Like, are you millennial or Gen Z or older?
That's a great question. I don't follow all that stuff, so.
Oh, okay.
But
if you don't mind me asking, like, how old are you? Around
29.
29. Okay, so if you're 29 and you wanted to retire at 65, you have no clue how many dollars you need, right? You have no idea. But when you look at it in terms of Bitcoin, you can predict what Bitcoin's price may be at some point in the future, and you can probably predict that having one Bitcoin by the time you retire will retire you. Like, it'll cover your expenses. One Bitcoin will probably be more than enough. Would you agree? Let's say in 35 years?
One Bitcoin in 35 years? I mean, it depends on what inflation looks like over that time.
What do you think? So. What do you personally think?
I think probably need more than one Bitcoin.
Okay, let's say 10 Bitcoin.
Probably somewhere between 1 and 10 for the average person to retire.
Okay, so let's say you have 10 Bitcoin. Do you think you'll be able to retire in 10 years or in 35 years?
I think so.
Okay, so you can predict that 10 Bitcoin is what I need, and you can actually have a goal to work towards, right? But if I were to ask you the same question for dollars, do you think that you'll be able to retire with $3 million in 35 years? I personally don't.
It'd be much. I don't think I'd be able to retire with $3 million in 35 years. But yeah, it'd be much harder to estimate too.
So the planning is just so much more difficult. With US dollars, there's so much volatility. It's kind of hidden. People think that the US dollar is stable, but it's really not. I mean, if you go to the grocery store, you're seeing that your cost of living is increasing and it's increasing. The US dollar is constantly losing value. So with the US dollar, it's extremely difficult to plan for the future because you have no idea where your expenses will be. But with Bitcoin, I think if you just give yourself a number, you try to aim for that. Let's say in 35 years, even if you don't have 10 Bitcoin, I think you'll have enough money to retire. Let's say you only get to like 1.5 Bitcoin. I think that'll probably be enough to retire. The good thing about Bitcoin is if you save for a certain period of time, that Bitcoin will definitely take care of you. But if you save dollars for a certain period of time, those dollars are not going to protect you because they can be confiscated from you through inflation.
For sure. Yeah, and I think a lot more people are starting to wake up to that over the past 4 years or so. Right? Yeah. I think it's something like the money supply has grown by like 40%. So it's very like blatant now. It's hard for them to hide it. It's
so obvious that the theft is happening, and I think it's just people haven't woken up to it yet.
Yeah. Rajat, thank you so much. We really appreciate the time. This is an awesome discussion. So happy to have you on the show with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Charles. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
You too.